Acting as if I were broke, I pleaded for a place to stay. My wealthy children shut the door in my face. Only my youngest son, a humble teacher, took me in, willing to sell his wedding ring just to feed me. The next morning, my lawyer showed up with a $100 million check, and their expressions were absolutely priceless. Can you imagine the crushing betrayal of your own children, slamming a door in your face, turning you away when you have nowhere else to go? I thought I knew my family, but one chilling night, I unearthed a truth so brutal, it ripped through the very foundation of my life, revealing who would stand by me and who would let me freeze. That night, the slam of the door in my face didn't just echo down the residential street, it reverberated deep within my soul. Jessica, my oldest daughter, had shut me out without a flicker of mercy. My own flesh and blood. Then I knocked on the second house, Michael's, my middle son. He opened it, just a sliver, shoved a crumpled $50 bill into my trembling hand, and practically pushed me away, muttering something about his professional reputation. 2 children, 2 heart-wrenching rejections, 2 direct stabs to the heart of a mother who truly believed she had given them everything. But then I reached the third door. The humblest one, the one furthest from the sprawling wealth of the district. And that's when everything changed. Daniel opened it, my youngest son, the teacher, the one with the miserable salary, the rest of the family always subtly, and not so subtly, disdained. And right by his side was Sarah, my daughter-in-law, the woman everyone else practically hated for not having money or a famous last name. They didn't hesitate. Not for a second. They just welcomed me in from the bitter cold, as if it were the most natural, obvious thing in the world. Later that night, as I sat on their worn-out sofa, I overheard them whispering in the kitchen. They thought I couldn't hear, but the walls of that tiny house were thin. They were talking about selling their wedding rings just to get me food. My heart just stopped. They didn't know who I really was. And they certainly didn't know what was coming. Because the very next morning, my lawyer, Robert, arrived with a full security team at that little house. When the truth finally came to light, right there in front of everyone, the contempt that had once painted Jessica's and Michael's faces was gone, replaced by pure, unadulterated terror. Because they had just lost everything. Let me take you back to the beginning, to the exact moment I decided to unleash this test. To the soul-shattering night I finally understood that, with my own money, I had unwittingly created monsters. It all started 3 weeks earlier, in my office on the 23rd floor. My name is Linda Miller, and for 35 years, I built a textile empire, supplying the biggest clothing chains across the entire continent. When my husband died 12 years ago, everyone, and I mean everyone, thought the company would collapse. My partners bet on my failure. My competitors, they sharpened their knives, just waiting to carve up the remains. But I didn't crumble. Oh no, I didn't. I worked 18-hour days. I learned every single aspect of the business my husband had managed. I negotiated with banks, with international suppliers, with difficult, arrogant clients who barely respected a woman in this industry. I swallowed humiliations that would have broken anyone else. And I didn't just keep the company afloat. I multiplied its value by 5. And you know who I did all that for? For my 3 children. To give them the life I never had. So they would never feel the gnawing bite of hunger like I did as a child. So they would have opportunities. Education, darling, that opens doors everywhere. Jessica studied in Switzerland. I paid for an MBA that cost over $120,000. Michael, my brilliant son, did his medical degree at an elite private university. I invested a staggering $200,000 in his education. Daniel, my youngest, he was the only one who chose a state university. He wanted to be a teacher. The other 2, they openly mocked him for years for that decision. I gave them everything. Houses, cars, lavish trips, powerful connections. Every single time they called me, I just opened my checkbook. Every problem they had, I solved it with money. I became a walking ATM for my own children. But that night in January, sitting in my empty, silent office, staring at the financial statements of all the allowances, all the money I had poured into them over the years, something inside me just broke. I had just received 3 calls, all 3 on the same day. Jessica wanted $100,000 to remodel her kitchen. Michael needed $70,000 to invest in some vague business with a friend. And Daniel? My Daniel? He only called to ask how my health was. That difference, it hit me like a sledgehammer. 2 children who only called me when they needed money. One who called just to check on me. It was in that searing moment that I made the decision. A test. The ultimate test. I would disappear. I would pretend to be utterly bankrupt, alone on the street with absolutely nothing. And I would knock on their doors, begging for shelter. I needed to see who would open. Who would be ashamed? Who would remember that I was their mother before I was their endless source of money? I asked Robert, my loyal, trusted lawyer, to keep it a secret. He tried to dissuade me, of course. Told me it was too hard, too risky for a 61-year-old woman. But my mind was made up. I needed to know the truth. I needed to see their naked hearts, stripped bare of the disguise that my money allowed them to wear. I put my most precious jewelry in the safe. I found old clothes in a thrift store, a worn gray coat that reeked of mothballs, stained pants, shoes with peeling soles. I even dirted my hands with earth, left my hair unwashed for 3 days, tied my meager belongings in a torn plastic bag. I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the woman staring back. I looked like a homeless person. I looked invisible. I looked exactly like what I needed to look like for this test to work. The plan was simple, brutally so. I would walk to their houses. I would knock. I would tell them I had lost everything, that I just needed a place to sleep. Just that, nothing more. And then I would watch. I would watch their reactions, their words, their gestures. The truth, you see, always surfaces when people don't have time to rehearse their lies. Robert got me a burner phone. He told me to call him if anything went wrong, that a car would be waiting 2 blocks away at all times, that a security team would be watching from a distance. But I knew I wasn't going to call. This had to be real. It had to hurt. It had to be authentic, because only in true pain is the true character of people revealed. The first night I left my penthouse, I left behind the warmth, the silk sheets, the panoramic view of the sparkling city. I descended 23 floors and stepped out onto the street. The February cold embraced me like a vicious slap. There was no turning back. I walked for hours. My feet filled with blisters. The plastic bag tore, and I had to carry my things in my arms. People dodged me on the sidewalks. Some looked at me with pity, others with contempt. Most just ignored me as if I were part of the street furniture. I spent the night at the bus station. The smell of urine and desperation clung to my clothes. An older woman, with eyes that held centuries of sadness, shared a piece of hard bread with me. She told me she'd been on the street for 5 years, that her children had forgotten her. As she spoke, a terrifying thought echoed in my mind. Will that be me in a few years if I don't do something now? By the 3rd day, I was ready. Dirty, hungry, frozen to the bone, but ready. I knew exactly what I was going to do. First to Jessica's house, then Michael's, and finally, to Daniel and Sarah's small home. I didn't know what I would find, but I was about to discover it. Jessica's mansion shimmered like an obscene jewel in the city's most exclusive neighborhood. Golden gates, gardens pruned with millimeter precision, a grand stone fountain at the entrance. I recognized every detail, every expensive nuance, because I had paid the down payment for that property. $200,000, right out of my personal savings, when she got married 7 years ago. I stood before the electronic gate, my legs trembling, not just from 3 days of sleeping on park benches, but from the raw fear of what I was about to do. I pressed the intercom button. I heard the buzz, then silence. I pressed again. Jessica's voice, metallic and bored, came through the speaker. She didn't even bother to ask who it was. She just said, in a weary tone, that she wasn't buying anything at the door. "It's me," I choked out, my voice raw. "It's your mother." There was a long pause. Too long. Then I heard the click and the gate opened just a few inches. I pushed it open further and walked up the pristine stone path I had helped design myself. Every step was a painful, searing irony. The front door opened just before I reached it. Jessica appeared in the frame, but she didn't step out. She stayed there, blocking the entrance with her body, as if I were an annoying street vendor. She was wearing a salmon-colored athletic outfit that probably cost more than most people earn in a month. Her hair was perfectly styled, her nails freshly done. Everything about her screamed money, comfort, superficiality. She looked me up and down with an expression I will never, ever forget. It wasn't concern. It was pure, unadulterated disgust. "Mom," she finally drawled, dragging out the word as if it burned her tongue. "What are you doing?" My very presence was an inconvenience that demanded immediate explanation. I told her the truth I had prepared, that I had lost everything. The company went bankrupt, creditors took my house, I'd been on the street for 3 days, and I just needed a place to sleep while I figured things out. My own daughter listened, not a single muscle in her face twitching. When I finished speaking, her eyes flickered over my shoulder, toward the neighboring houses. She was more worried about who might be seeing me standing in her driveway than about the devastating story I had just told her. That gesture, it went through me like a rusty knife. "Mom, this isn't a good time," she whispered, lowering her voice. "Robert has an important dinner with partners tonight. I can't deal with these types of situations right now." Situations. She called me a situation, as if I were a plumbing problem or a leak in the roof. I begged her. God, I hate to admit I did, but I needed to see how far her coldness went. I told her it would only be for one night, that I would sleep anywhere, the maid's room, the garage, wherever. I just needed a roof. Jessica shook her head. Her diamond earrings sparkled with the movement. Those earrings I gave her for her last birthday, $5,000 in precious stones, dangling from the ears of a daughter who had no room for her mother in her 6-bedroom house. "You can't stay here," she said firmly. "This would affect our reputation at the club. The neighbors talk. You know how this is. Besides, if you're really in financial trouble, the last thing you need is to be around people who are going to judge you. It's for your own good, Mom. For my own good." She wrapped her rejection in a layer of false, inverted maternal concern, as if she were doing me a favor by slamming the door in my face. I tried to take a step forward. She stepped back and closed the door until only a crack remained. "There are shelters," she said. "Charity organizations. Surely you'll find something. And when you solve your situation, when things improve, we'll talk. But right now, I can't help you." "I'm sorry." She didn't feel it. That was the most horrible thing. Her voice didn't have a shred of genuine pain. She was just in a hurry to end this uncomfortable conversation and return to her perfect world of appearances and superficiality. "Jessica," I said, using her full name, my voice cracking. "Please. I am your mother. I changed your diapers. I taught you to walk. I paid for your education, your wedding, this house. Everything you have came from me." Her face hardened. And there I saw something that froze my blood more than any night on the street. I saw resentment. As if every single thing I had done for her was a debt that overwhelmed her. As if my motherly love was an unbearable burden she had been waiting to drop. "Exactly, Mom," she said, with poison in every syllable. "You gave everything. You were always giving, controlling, deciding. Now that you have nothing, you expect me to return everything to you as if it were an investment. Well, it doesn't work that way. I have my own life, my own responsibilities. I can't carry your financial mistakes." The door closed. I heard the deadbolt turning. The sound of that metal sliding was like hearing the coffin of our relationship closing forever. I stood there, staring at the solid mahogany what I had helped pay for. Through the side window, I saw Jessica walk back to her living room, pick up her phone, dial, and start talking to someone, laughing. I walked away from that house feeling something worse than sadness. I felt empty, hollowed out, as if a part of me had stayed on the other side of that closed door. The daughter I raised, the girl who hugged me when she had nightmares, the young woman who cried on my shoulder when her first boyfriend dumped her, she no longer existed. She had been replaced by this cold, calculating woman who valued the opinion of her neighbors more than the well-being of her own mother. I walked 2 miles until I reached the neighborhood where Michael lived. My feet were bleeding inside the broken shoes. Hunger made me see black spots every time I moved my head too fast. But I kept going. I had to complete this test. I had to know if all my children were the same, or if there was any humanity left in any of them. Michael's house was more modern than Jessica's. All glass and steel, minimalist, cold. Just like him. I rang the doorbell and waited. This time, no delay. Michael opened the door almost immediately, as if he'd been expecting a delivery or something. His expression when he saw me was one of genuine shock. "Mom," he exclaimed. And for a second, a foolish second, I thought maybe he would be different. "What happened to you?" He seemed worried. His eyes scanned my dirty clothes, my greasy hair, the torn bag I was carrying. He took a step toward me, and I thought he would hug me. He didn't. Instead, he looked quickly to both sides of the street. Just like Jessica. The same concern for appearances. The same fear that someone would see them with me. "Come in quickly," he said, ushering me inside, but closing the door immediately behind me, as if he were hiding evidence of a crime. I stayed in the foyer. He didn't invite me further inside. He kept his distance, as if my poverty were contagious. "What happened?" he repeated. "Where have you been? Why didn't you call?" I told him the same story. Bankruptcy, losses, street, need for temporary shelter. Michael listened with his arms crossed. I saw his brain working, calculating. I saw the numbers forming behind his eyes. He wasn't thinking about how to help me. He was thinking about how to get rid of me in the fastest, least problematic way possible. When I finished speaking, he sighed a long, tired sigh, as if I were a difficult patient in his office, and not his mother. "Mom, I have a reputation to maintain. I'm a cardiovascular surgeon. My patients are important people, politicians, businessmen. If anyone finds out that my mother is living on the street, that affects my practice, you understand, right?" "No," I told him with total, raw honesty. "I don't understand." Michael took out his wallet. The leather was Italian. I recognized it because I had given it to him for his birthday 2 years ago. It cost $800. He took out some bills, $50 in total. He held it out to me, but without getting close, as if he were afraid to touch me. "Take this," he said. "Go to a cheap hotel. Rest. Take a shower. When you're presentable, we can talk about how to solve your situation. But you can't stay here. I have surgeries tomorrow morning. I need concentration. I can't have this distraction." Distraction. His homeless mother was a distraction. I didn't take the money. I stood there, staring him straight in the eyes, searching for some trace of the boy who used to run to my arms when I came home from work. The boy who told me that when he grew up, he would buy me a big house so I would never have to work so hard. That boy had died at some point, and I hadn't even noticed the funeral. "Michael," I said, my voice broken. "I spent entire nights studying with you for your medical exams. I brought you coffee at 3 in the morning when you stayed up reviewing. When you couldn't pay for textbooks that cost $500 each, I sold my jewelry to buy them for you. And now you offer me $50 and call me a distraction." He clenched his jaw. The bills were still extended between us like a physical barrier. "Mom, it's not personal," he said, with that clinical voice he probably used to give bad news to his patients' families. "It's just that right now I am not in a position to help you the way you need. I have my family to support, my own expenses. I can't simply carry another person." Another person. That was me to him. Not his mother. Not the woman who sacrificed her own dreams to finances. Just another person who needed something from him and inconvenienced him. I took the $50, not because I needed them, but because I wanted to see if even that pathetic gesture would elicit any kind of emotion. Nothing. His face remained neutral, professional, distant. As if he had just completed an unpleasant but necessary business transaction. "Now, I need you to leave," he said, pointing to the door. "Seriously, Mom, I have to wake up early. I can't be dealing with this right now. When you stabilize, call me and we'll see what we can do. But you have to understand that I also have my limits." He put his hand on my shoulder, not with affection, but with firm, dismissive guidance toward the exit. He was literally pushing me out of his life. When we reached the door, he opened it and signaled me to leave. The cold night air hit me again. "Take care," he said. "And honestly, Mom, you should have been more careful with your investments. At your age, you should already have everything secured. This shouldn't be happening." He was blaming me. He was telling me this was my fault. That if I was on the street, it was because I had been irresponsible. The son whose $200,000 education I paid for was giving me lessons on financial management while kicking me out of his house. The door closed. This time, I didn't hear the deadbolt because Michael had already disappeared inside his house before I even finished walking down the porch steps. He didn't even stay to make sure I got away safely. The $50 bills were crumpled in my hand. I looked at them as if they were poisoned. This dirty paper was what my relationship with my son was worth. $50. Less than what he probably spent on any random dinner. I put the money in my pocket. I would use it later. Not for me, but to remind myself that this had happened, that this was real, that my two oldest children had rejected me on the same day without even blinking. 2 doors closed, 2 children lost. I had one left. Daniel, my youngest son, the one who chose to be a teacher when everyone told him it was a waste of talent. The one who married Sarah, a girl from a humble family who worked cleaning offices when they met. The one the whole family looked at with pity mixed with disdain. And I have to confess something that shames me. I had also looked down on them. Not openly, but inside. When Daniel introduced me to Sarah, I expected more. I expected a girl from a good family. I expected useful connections. I expected someone who would elevate my son's status, not someone who would keep him in economic mediocrity. At family gatherings, Jessica and Michael made hurtful comments. They'd say things like, "What a pity Daniel settled for so little," or "Imagine if he had met someone with ambition." And I didn't defend them. I stayed silent. I let those poisonous words float in the air without contradicting them. Sarah always noticed. She saw how her smile got smaller every time Jessica talked about her trips to Europe, or when Michael mentioned his millionaire patients. She saw how Daniel squeezed her hand under the table, giving her silent strength, and I just looked away. Now, walking toward their small house in a working-class neighborhood, far from the mansions of my other children, I felt the crushing weight of my own hypocrisy. I had judged Sarah for not having money. I had found her insufficient, and she probably knew it. Probably every time she saw me, she could feel my silent disappointment. Daniel and Sarah's house was a modest, one-story building. Cream-colored paint peeling in some parts. A small garden with flowers that Sarah evidently tended with her own hands. A wooden fence that needed repair. Everything was simple, humble, honest. There was no electronic gate. There was no intercom. Just a wooden door with a simple doorbell. I pressed the button and heard the chime ring inside the house. I heard steps. The door opened. Sarah appeared in front of me. She was wearing an olive green knitted sweater she had probably made herself. Her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. No makeup, no jewelry, except her wedding ring, which was a thin silver band that probably cost less than $100 when they bought it. Her eyes went wide when she saw me. "Linda," she exclaimed, using my first name as she always did. She never called me mother-in-law, just Linda. At first, that had annoyed me. It seemed like a lack of respect. Now, I understood it was her way of trying to connect with me as equals. "My God, what happened to you?" she said immediately. And without waiting for an answer, she took me by the arm and pulled me inside. The warmth of the house wrapped around me. It smelled of home-cooked food, of freshly baked bread. Of a real home. "Daniel," she shouted toward the inside of the house. "Come quick, it's your mom." Daniel appeared from what seemed to be the kitchen. He was wearing a simple gray shirt and old jeans. When he saw me, his face cycled through a rainbow of emotions: surprise, worry, pain, and something else I hadn't seen on Jessica's or Michael's faces. Genuine love. "Mom," he said, running toward me. "What happened? Are you okay? Did they hurt you? Where have you been?" His hands touched my face, my shoulders, checking me as if looking for wounds. He didn't care about my dirt. He didn't care about my smell. He only cared if I was okay. Sarah had already disappeared into the house. I heard her moving quickly, opening drawers, turning on the water heater. Daniel guided me to the sofa, an old piece of brown fabric furniture that had a patch sewn on one of the arms. I sat down and felt my legs finally give way after so many days of walking. I told them the story again. The bankruptcy, losing everything, the nights on the street. Daniel listened with tears forming in his eyes. He didn't say anything judgmental, nothing about how I'd gotten into this situation. He just listened, with an open and broken heart. When I finished, there was a heavy silence. Then Daniel spoke. "You're staying here," he said firmly. "It's not negotiable, Mom. This is your house now." Sarah returned with clean towels and clothes. "I heated water for you to bathe," she said with a gentle smile. "We don't have a tub, just a shower, but the water is hot." "Then you eat something. You look very thin." "But you don't have room," I protested weakly, although my heart was already exploding with an emotion I couldn't name. "You only have one bedroom." "We will sleep in the living room," Daniel said, without hesitation. "You take the bed. We are not going to discuss this." "No," I insisted. "I can sleep in the living room. You need your privacy." Sarah knelt in front of me. Her warm brown eyes looked at me with a warmth I didn't deserve. "Linda," she said softly, "you're Daniel's mom. You are family. Family doesn't sleep on the sofa when there's a bed available. Please, let us do this for you." That "let us do this for you," it tore me to pieces. My other children had offered me money and excuses. This couple, who barely had anything, offered me everything they had, without conditions or reproaches. I bathed in their small bathroom, which had chipped tiles and a patched shower curtain. The hot water fell on my dirty skin, and I let myself cry there, where no one could see me. I wasn't crying for the days on the street. I was crying for the years I had wasted, valuing the wrong things. I cried because my two oldest children, to whom I gave castles, closed their doors on me, and my youngest son, who lived in this humble house, opened his wide for me. When I came out of the bathroom, Sarah had put clean clothes on the bed. They were hers. Soft gray sweatpants and a light brown sweatshirt. They were a little big on me because Sarah was taller, but they were clean and smelled of cheap fabric softener and genuine care. At the small dining table, which barely fit in the space between the living room and the kitchen, a plate of food awaited me. Homemade vegetable soup, toast, a glass of orange juice. Nothing elaborate, nothing expensive, but prepared with love and served with dignity. Daniel and Sarah sat with me. They didn't look at me with pity while I ate. They talked about normal things, about Daniel's students, about how one of them had finally learned to read after months of effort. Sarah talked about the flowers in the garden, which were starting to sprout despite the cold. They treated me like a person, not a tragedy. After dinner, while Sarah cleared the dishes, I heard Daniel tell her in a low voice to join him in the kitchen. He thought I couldn't hear them, but the thin walls of that house kept no secrets. I sat on the sofa, pretending to watch the old television they had, but every fiber of my being was concentrated on listening to their conversation. "We don't have enough money to support 3 people, Daniel whispered, a raw edge of desperation in his voice. "The salary barely covers the 2 of us." "I know," Sarah replied, her voice calm, without a hint of panic. "I already thought about it." There was a silence. Then I heard the unmistakable sound of a drawer opening. "We can sell the rings," Sarah said, her voice surprisingly steady. "We don't really need them. They're just symbols. Our marriage doesn't depend on 2 pieces of metal." My heart stopped. They were talking about selling their wedding rings. The only jewelry they had. The symbols of their commitment. For me. "No," Daniel said, but his voice didn't sound convincing. It sounded torn. "Those rings mean something to you." "They mean that we love each other," Sarah replied. "And we will keep loving each other with or without them. Your mom needs us now. That is more important than any symbol. Tomorrow I'm going to the pawn shop. They'll probably give us about $300. With that, we buy food for the month and see how we go on. $300. That was all their rings would be worth. Meanwhile, Jessica had $5,000 earrings dangling from her ears and wouldn't let me into her house. Michael carried an $800 wallet and gave me $50 as if it were a generous handout. "I love you," I heard Daniel say, his voice broken, full of raw emotion. "I don't know what I did to deserve you." "Nothing," Sarah replied with such tenderness. "It's not about deserving. It's about choosing to do the right thing. Your mom raised you. She educated you. Now it's our turn to take care of her. That's how real families work. I closed my eyes tightly. Tears ran down my cheeks uncontrollably. This woman I had looked at with disdain, this woman who cleaned offices to help with expenses because Daniel's teacher's salary wasn't enough, this woman I considered insufficient for my son. She was the only person in the world who understood the true meaning of family. They returned to the living room. I quickly wiped my tears and pretended to be focused on the news. Sarah brought me a hand-knitted, mustard-colored blanket. "It's my grandmother's," she said as she put it over my legs. "It always kept me warm. I hope it does for you too." That night, despite my protests, they took me to the bedroom. It was a small room with a double bed, an old closet, and a dresser with peeling paint. The sheets were simple white cotton, washed so many times they were soft as silk. On the nightstand, there was a wedding photo of them. Daniel in a suit that was clearly borrowed. Sarah in a simple white dress she probably bought at some discount store. Both smiling with a happiness so pure, it almost hurt to look at it. "Please rest," Daniel said, kissing my forehead like he used to do when he was a child. "Tomorrow we'll figure out what to do. But tonight, just sleep peacefully. You're safe here." They left, closing the door behind them. I was left alone in that room that smelled of cheap lavender and hope. I lay in that bed, the only luxury this couple possessed, and they were giving it to me without reservation. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Jessica's face slamming the door on me. I saw Michael handing me $50 as if I were just any beggar. And then I saw Sarah, kneeling in front of me, calling me family, with eyes full of genuine compassion. Around midnight, I heard movement in the living room. I got up silently and cracked the door just a few inches. I saw Daniel and Sarah settling on the small sofa. They didn't fit well. Daniel was practically hanging off one end. Sarah snuggled against him, trying not to fall. "Sorry," Daniel whispered. "I know this is uncomfortable." "I'm fine," replied Sarah. "Just think about your mom, sleeping warm and safe. That is worth any discomfort." They remained silent for a moment. Then Daniel spoke again. "I'm sorry. I can't give you more. I'm sorry you live like this. You deserve a big house, nice things, an easier life." Sarah's answer, it utterly destroyed me. "Daniel, I have exactly what I want. I have you. We have health. We have jobs. We have a roof. And now we can help someone who needs us. That isn't little. That is everything. That is everything." Those 3 words contained more wisdom than all the university degrees I had paid for. This woman, with her simple clothes and modest house, understood something my rich children had forgotten, or perhaps never learned. That real wealth is not measured in dollars, but in the capacity to give when you have nothing. I went back to bed, and this time, I truly cried. I cried hard, drowning the sound in the pillows so they wouldn't hear me. I cried for the years I spent building an empire for children who valued nothing except money. I cried for having judged Sarah so poorly. I cried for almost having lost the opportunity to know the true heart of my youngest son. But I also cried with relief, because in the midst of this painful test, I had found something I thought I had lost forever. Evidence that genuine love still existed, that kindness had not died, that not all my children had turned into selfish monsters. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of cheap coffee and toast. I got up and found Sarah in the kitchen making breakfast. She was wearing the same sweater as the day before. It was probably the only one she had for winter. Her hair was styled in the same simple ponytail, unpretentious, without masks. "Good morning," she said, smiling when she saw me. "I hope you slept well. There's coffee if you want." She poured me a cup of the cheapest coffee that probably existed on the market, and it tasted like glory. We sat together at the small table. Daniel had already left for school. He had to arrive early to prepare his classroom. Sarah looked at me over her cup. There was something in her eyes, a quiet determination. "Linda," she said slowly, "know that as long as you need to be here, this is your house. It doesn't matter how long it is, a month, a year, whatever. We are not going to kick you out." Her words were so profoundly different from Jessica's and Michael's that they almost didn't seem to be from the same language. "I appreciate it," I managed to say. "But I can't take your room indefinitely." "You aren't taking it from us," she replied. We are sharing it. That is how it works. When someone is in trouble, we share what we have. She looked me directly in the eyes. I know I was never enough for you, she said, with a brutal honesty that pierced me. I know you wanted more for Daniel. A wife with money, with connections, with a college education. I am just a girl who cleans offices and tends flowers. Sarah, I started to say, but she raised her hand. It's okay, she continued. I understand. But I want you to know something. I love your son more than I have ever loved anything in my life. And even if we never have much money, even if we never live in a mansion, I am going to make sure that he knows every day that he is loved, valued, and respected. And now, you too. Her words broke me completely. The whole facade I had maintained during these days collapsed like a rotten building. I started crying right there at that tiny table, drinking cheap coffee from a chipped mug. I cried like I hadn't cried in decades. Sarah stood up and hugged me. She didn't say anything. She didn't try to comfort me with empty words. She just held me while I crumbled. Her sweater absorbed my tears, and she simply let me feel everything I needed to feel. When I could finally speak, I told her the truth. You were right. I never thought you were enough. I looked at you and saw poverty. I saw limitations. I saw everything you weren't, instead of seeing everything you are. And I was so profoundly wrong that I am ashamed. Sarah cleared her throat and looked at me with those brown eyes, full of a maturity I didn't have despite my 61 years. People make mistakes, she said simply. What matters is what we do after realizing it. She took my hands in hers. They were rough from work. She had short nails, unpainted, with traces of dirt underneath because she had been working in the garden. Working hands. Honest hands. Hands that were worth more than all of Jessica's perfect manicures. I want you to know something, I continued. When all this ends, when I solve my situation, I am going to compensate you for everything. I promise you. She shook her head gently. I don't want compensation, Linda. We aren't keeping score. We are being family. That word again, family. Jessica and Michael had used it as an excuse to justify everything I gave them. You are family, they said when they needed money. You are our mother, they argued when they wanted something. But when I needed them, that same word disappeared from their vocabulary. Sarah used that word differently. For her, family meant responsibility. It meant sacrifice. It meant opening doors instead of closing them. I spent the day helping around the house. I insisted. Sarah worked cleaning shifts in the afternoons, and before leaving, she left me a list of simple things I could do: fold clothes, wash dishes, sweep. Tasks I hadn't done in years because I always had maids. There was something deeply humiliating and, at the same time, profoundly liberating in scrubbing that small kitchen. My hands, accustomed to signing checks and million-dollar contracts, now scrubbed old pots with a worn sponge. And with every movement, I felt like I was cleaning something more than dirty dishes. I was cleaning years of arrogance. When Daniel returned from school in the afternoon, he found me making dinner. I had used the few ingredients they had in the pantry to make something simple: rice with vegetables. Nothing elaborate, but I had done it with my own hands. Mom, he said, surprised. You didn't have to do this. I wanted to, I replied. It's the least I can do. The three of us ate dinner together. We talked about everyday things. Daniel talked about a student who had made a major breakthrough that day, a dyslexic boy who had finally read a full paragraph without help. The way Daniel talked about that achievement, with eyes shining with pride, made me understand something crucial. My other children measured success in money and status. Daniel measured it in the genuine impact he made in the world. Jessica probably didn't even know the names of the people who worked for her. Michael saw his patients as cases, as sources of income. But Daniel knew the full stories of his students. He knew which kids came without breakfast, which ones lived in troubled homes, who needed an adult to believe in them. And he did it with a salary that barely covered rent, without complaining, without asking for recognition, simply because he believed it was the right thing to do. That night, after they insisted again that I take the bed, I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling of that small room. Tomorrow, Robert would come. Tomorrow, the truth would be revealed. Tomorrow, this test I had started with so much rage and determination would end. But now, lying in the bed of this couple who had given me everything without asking for anything, I felt something different from rage. I felt deep shame. Shame for having doubted Daniel. For having compared him unfavorably to his siblings for years. For having thought that choosing to be a teacher was wasting his potential. Daniel was the only one of my children who had fulfilled the true purpose of the education I paid for them. It wasn't about accumulating wealth. It was about becoming a better human being. And he was the only one who had achieved it. I also felt shame for Sarah. For every time I subtly excluded her from family conversations. For every time I mentioned the wives of other successful men, as if pointing out what Daniel could have had. For every look, every one of those little cruelties. And yet, when I knocked on her door, desperate and broken, she welcomed me with open arms. I heard their voices in the living room. They were up late. I got up silently and approached the door. Not to spy this time, but because I needed to better understand these two people who had shown me more humanity than anyone in years. "Do you think your mom will be okay?" Sarah asked, her voice sounding worried. "I don't know," Daniel replied. "I've never seen her like this. So lost. So vulnerable." "Tomorrow I'm going early to the pawn shop," Sarah said. "With what they give us for the rings, we can buy nutritious food for her. She looks very thin." They were still talking about the rings. They were really going to do it. They were going to sell the only valuable items they had. "There's something I don't understand," Daniel said after a silence. "How could my mom, with all her business knowledge, lose everything so fast? She was brilliant. Careful. It makes no sense." Sarah took a moment to respond. "Smart people make mistakes too," she said finally. Or maybe she trusted the wrong people. "I don't know. What matters is that she is here, and we are going to help her." "I'm scared," admitted Daniel. "Scared of not being able to take care of her like she took care of me. She gave me everything, education, opportunities. And I can only offer her an old sofa and simple food." "Daniel," Sarah said firmly, "you are giving her the only thing that really matters. You are giving her love. That is more valuable than any mansion or bank account." "Not for her," replied Daniel with sadness. "Her whole life has been about material success, about building empires. What will she think of me now, seeing me in this small house, unable to give her anything she deserves?" "Maybe," Sarah said thoughtfully, her voice soft but sure. "Maybe this is exactly what she needed to see. That success isn't measured in square feet or bank accounts. It is measured in who is there when everything else falls apart." Her words floated in the air. She was right. Completely right. This test I had designed to evaluate my children was evaluating me too. It was showing me all the ways I had failed. All the wrong lessons I had taught. All the distorted values I had transmitted without realizing it. Jessica and Michael were my creation. I had turned them into what they were. I had taught them that money solves everything, that appearances matter more than substance, that success is measured in material possessions. And they had learned the lesson perfectly. Only Daniel had resisted. He had chosen a different path, despite my subtle disapproval. He had found in Sarah someone who shared values I had forgotten existed. And together, they had built something Jessica and Michael would never have, a life with purpose and real meaning. I went back to bed with a heavy heart. Tomorrow, everything would change. Robert would arrive with the documents, with the truth, with the proof that I was never bankrupt, that this was all theater to reveal the true character of my children. And it had revealed much more than I expected, not just about them, but about me too. I finally fell asleep, emotionally exhausted, knowing that when the sun came up, the last act of this painful and necessary drama would begin. The act where the truth would come to light, where justice would be served, where scores would be settled. But also knowing that after tomorrow, nothing would ever be the same again. The broken relationships with Jessica and Michael would probably never be repaired. And the relationship with Daniel and Sarah would transform in ways I still couldn't completely predict. The only thing I knew for sure was that these two human beings, sleeping on an uncomfortable sofa, willing to sell their wedding rings for a woman who had looked down on them, deserved everything I could give them. And tomorrow, I would give it to them. 6:56 a.m. I woke up before dawn. The burner phone Robert had given me was hidden in the inner pocket of my dirty coat. I took it out with shaking hands. It was 5:03 in the morning. I dialed the number I had memorized. Robert answered on the second ring. "Linda," he said, with a sleepy but alert voice. "Are you okay? Did something happen?" "I'm fine," I whispered, so as not to wake Daniel and Sarah. "It is time. Come at 9 o'clock in the morning. Bring the documents. Bring the security team. Everything as we planned." There was a pause. "Are you sure?" he asked. "Once we do this, there is no turning back." "I am sure," I replied. "More sure than I have been of anything in my life. See you at 9 o'clock." I hung up and put the phone away. I sat on the bed, watching the first lights of dawn filter through the cheap brown curtains. In a few hours, everything would change. The mask would fall, and I would have to face the consequences of what I had discovered. I got up and left the bedroom. Daniel and Sarah were still asleep on the sofa. They looked so uncomfortable it hurt to look at them. Daniel's arm hung to the floor. Sarah had her head at a strange angle against the backrest, but their hands were intertwined, even in sleep. I made coffee in silence. I found bread in the pantry and toasted it. I set the table as best I could. Small acts of service, which were all I could offer them in this last moment before the truth exploded. Sarah woke up first. She saw me in the kitchen and smiled with that tired but genuine smile. "You got up early," she said, stretching carefully so as not to wake Daniel. "I couldn't sleep," I admitted. "I was thinking." She approached and accepted the cup of coffee I offered her. "Thinking about what?" she asked curiously, but without pressure. "About you too," I replied honestly. "About what you have done for me. About what you are willing to do." Sarah took a sip of coffee. Her eyes studied me over the cup. There was something in her gaze, a quiet intelligence, suggesting maybe she knew more than she let on. "Linda," she said slowly, "can I ask you something?" "Sure," I replied, though my heart started beating faster. "You don't have to answer if you don't want to," she continued. "But something doesn't add up. A woman like you, with your experience, with your intelligence, how did you lose everything so fast? And why did you come walking to our houses instead of asking for help some other way?" I froze. Sarah was looking at me with an expression that wasn't accusatory, but deeply curious. She waited for me to say something, to explain the inconsistencies her sharp mind had detected. Before I could answer, Daniel woke up with a groan. His back clearly hurt from the night on the sofa. "Good morning," he said, rubbing his neck. "What time is it?" "Almost 7, replied Sarah. But her eyes didn't leave mine. We were talking. Daniel got up and approached us. He noticed the tension in the air. "Is something wrong?" he asked, looking between the two of us. Sarah softened her expression. "No, nothing, just talking." But I knew. She knew. Or at least suspected. This woman everyone underestimated, who cleaned offices and tended flowers, had a perception my children educated in expensive universities never developed. "I need to tell you something," I started, but the words got stuck in my throat. Daniel put a hand on my shoulder. "Whatever it is, Mom, we are here." Sarah spoke again. "Before you say anything, I want you to know it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what secret you are keeping. It doesn't matter what test you have put us through. We still opened the door for you. We still offered you our bed, and we would do it again." I stared at her with my mouth open. "You knew," I managed to say finally. "I suspected," she corrected. "Since you arrived, your way of speaking, your posture, the small details that didn't fit. But I decided it didn't matter, because even if this was a test, the right answer remained the same: to receive you, to care for you, to love you." Daniel looked between us, confused. "What are you talking about?" Sarah looked at him with tenderness. "Your mom isn't bankrupt, love. Or at least I don't think she is. I think this was a test to see how we would react." Daniel turned to me, eyes wide open. "Is it true?" he asked. Tears ran down my face. "Yes," I whispered. "It is true. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I expected to see rage. I expected yelling. I expected them to kick me out of the house with righteous indignation. But Daniel simply hugged me. He hugged me tight while I cried against his chest. "Why?" he asked finally. "Why did you do this?" "Because I needed to know," I replied between sobs. "I needed to know who loved me for being their mother, and who only saw me as a source of money. And I discovered things that broke my heart. I told them everything. About Jessica closing the door on me out of fear of what the neighbors would say, about Michael giving me $50 and pushing me out, about how only they two had received me without conditions. When I finished, Sarah said something I will never forget. Then the test worked. You asked that we would do the right thing even when no one was watching, she replied. That our values are real, not acted. That we are exactly who we thought we were, Daniel added. And we also discovered that you need to heal, Mom, because a mother who has to test her children's love like this is very hurt. He was right. Completely right. I looked at the clock. It was 8:15. In 45 minutes, Robert would arrive with everything, with the documents proving my wealth, with the security team, with the evidence that would change everything. There is something else, I told them. At 9, my lawyer is coming with documents. He is going to reveal who I really am, and there will be consequences for Jessica and Michael. What kind of consequences? Asked Daniel. I am going to rewrite my will, I replied. They closed their doors on me. I am going to close mine. You will inherit everything. Daniel stepped back as if slapped. You can't do that, Mom. They are your children too. Children who rejected me when I needed them most, I replied with a firm voice. Children who valued their reputation and comfort more than my well-being. While you and Sarah were willing to sell your wedding rings for me. Sarah intervened, her voice gentle but firm. Linda, I understand your pain. I understand your rage. But disinheriting your children won't heal what is broken. It will only create more resentment, more division. It's not about revenge, I argued, though deep down, I knew there was some revenge in my decision. It's about consequences. It's about teaching them that actions have results, that they can't treat people like trash and expect to keep receiving rewards. Daniel sat on the sofa, burying his head in his hands. This is too much, he muttered. I don't want your money, Mom. I never wanted it. I chose to be a teacher precisely because I wanted something more meaningful than accumulating wealth. I know, I said, sitting next to him. And that is why you deserve to have it, because you don't seek it. Because you understand that money is a tool, not a goal. Sarah knelt in front of us. Her eyes went from Daniel to me. Can I suggest something? She asked carefully. Please, I replied. I need to hear a sane voice in the middle of all this. Don't do anything permanent today, she said. Let Robert come. Let the truth be revealed. But don't rewrite the will immediately. Give yourself time. Give time to Jessica and Michael, too. Maybe when they face what they did, when they see the real consequences of their actions, something changes in them. They won't change, I said bitterly. I know them. You knew them, corrected Sarah, a gentle wisdom in her voice. But people can surprise us, for better or for worse. Give them a chance to be wrong about them. Daniel raised his head. Mom, if you really want to teach them something, teach them with your life, not with your death. Show them what true love looks like, what forgiveness looks like. Don't give them more money if you don't want to. It's okay. But don't cut them completely out of your life. That will hurt you more than them. His words hit deep. This son of mine, this good man who earned less in a year than his siblings spent on vacations, was giving me lessons in humanity that I desperately needed. What do you propose then? I asked. Let the lawyer come, replied Daniel. Let Jessica and Michael know this was a test. Let them feel the weight of what they did. But after that, offer them a chance for restoration, not money, but relationship. If they want it, they will have to earn it. If not, at least you will know you tried. I looked at the clock. 8:30, half an hour to decide how I would handle the most important moment of this test. Half an hour to decide if I wanted justice or reconciliation, revenge or healing. I will call Robert, I said. I will tell him to come, but not to bring will documents, only the ones proving my real identity. Sarah smiled. It's a good start. I dialed Robert's number. Change of plans, I told him when he answered. Bring everything except the will papers. This is going to be a confrontation, not an execution. Understood, he replied. We will be there in 20 minutes. I hung up and looked at Daniel and Sarah. I don't know if I can forgive them, I admitted. I don't know if I can ever look at Jessica and Michael the same way. You don't have to know today, said Sarah. Forgiveness isn't a switch you turn on and off. It is a path, sometimes long and painful, but it is worth walking. The next 20 minutes passed in tense silence. We sat together in the small living room. Sarah made more coffee. Daniel changed clothes. I stayed in the borrowed sweatshirt and sweatpants. I wanted Robert to see me like this. I wanted to remember what it felt like to be on the other side. At exactly 9 o'clock, we heard vehicles stop outside. I looked out the window and saw 2 black SUVs. Robert got out of the first one, along with his assistant. From the second vehicle, 4 men from the security team got out, dressed in formal suits. The contrast was absurd. This humble house in this working-class neighborhood, suddenly invaded by this display of power and money. The neighbors started peeking out their windows. Some came out to their front yards to see what was happening. Robert knocked on the door before I could. He looked at me and, for a moment, didn't recognize me. Then his eyes went wide. "My God, Linda," he whispered. "You look terrible." "Thanks," I replied with dry irony. "Let me introduce you to the only 2 people who worried about how I looked when I arrived at their door." Daniel and Sarah approached shyly. They were clearly intimidated by all this show of resources. Robert greeted them with genuine respect. "It is an honor to meet you," he said. "Linda has spoken a lot about you these days." "Nothing good, I suppose," said Sarah with a sad smile. "All good," corrected Robert. "All very good." Everyone entered the small living room, which was now crammed with people. The security men stood uncomfortably, clearly out of place in this modest space. Robert opened his briefcase and took out documents. "These are the account statements for your companies," he said, showing me papers. "Everything is still running perfectly. The board of directors has handled daily operations in your absence, as we agreed. There was no bankruptcy, no loss. It was all manufactured." Daniel looked at the numbers on the documents. His eyes grew wider and wider. "Mom," he whispered, a tremor in his voice. "These numbers are real." "Completely real," confirmed Robert. "Your mother is one of the richest women in the country, and she pretended to be bankrupt to test her children." Sarah put her hand to her mouth. "We had been willing to sell our rings," she said, almost voiceless. "And you could have bought 1,000 rings without even noticing," I finished for her. "Precisely," I replied. "Because you would have sold your rings while my other children didn't even open their doors." Robert took out more documents. "These are the records of the calls I made to Jessica and Michael early this morning," he said. "I informed them that there was new information about your situation and to present themselves here at 10 o'clock in the morning. Both confirmed they would come." I looked at the clock. 9:40, in 20 minutes, my other 2 children would arrive, and they would find something they never expected. They would find the truth, and they would find the consequences of their choices. Daniel looked sick. "I don't know if I can be here when they arrive," he said. "I don't know if I can see their faces when they realize." "You need to be here," I said firmly. "You need to witness this, because this is not just about them. It is about you too. About validating that your way of living, your way of loving, is the right one. It is about proving that you are not the failed son they always insinuated you were." Sarah took his hand. "I will be here with you," she told him. "Whatever happens." The minutes dragged. Robert reviewed documents. The security men waited in silence. Daniel and Sarah sat together on the sofa, their hands intertwined. And I stood by the window, watching the street, waiting to see my other children's expensive cars appear. At 5 minutes to 10, Jessica arrived. Her white Mercedes shone obscenely on this street of modest cars. She parked and got out, wearing huge sunglasses and a cream-colored coat that probably cost more than Daniel's monthly rent. 2 minutes later, Michael arrived. His gray BMW stopped behind Jessica's Mercedes. He got out, checking his expensive watch, clearly annoyed at having to be here. They met on the sidewalk in front of Daniel's house. I saw them talking. Jessica gestured toward the house with evident contempt. Michael shrugged. Neither of them seemed happy to be here. They walked together toward the door. I could hear their voices before they knocked. "Why would Mom's lawyer visit here?" asked Jessica with evident disgust, as if Daniel's house was some plague pit. "This is ridiculous." "I have no idea," replied Michael. "But let's do this fast. I have a surgery at 1. They knocked on the door. Daniel looked at me with panic in his eyes. I nodded. He took a deep breath and opened it. The expression on Jessica and Michael's faces when they saw Daniel was one of barely disguised annoyance. "What are you doing here?" asked Jessica, as if Daniel were an intruder in his own home. "I live here," replied Daniel with a trembling voice. "It is my house." Jessica entered without waiting for an invitation, Michael behind her. Their eyes scanned the small room with poorly hidden contempt. They saw Robert with his expensive suit. They saw the security men. They saw the documents scattered on the table. And then, they saw me. Jessica froze. "Mom," she exclaimed. "What are you doing here?" She turned to Robert. "You told us you had information about our mother's situation. Not that she would be here." "Oh, she is definitely here," said Robert with a tone I had never heard from him before. Cold. Professional. Devastating. Michael looked me up and down. I was still wearing Sarah's borrowed clothes. My hair was still not professionally styled. I still looked poor. "Did you get money to come all the way here?" he asked with that condescending tone he probably used with indigent patients. "I didn't need money," I replied. "I was already here. I have been here for 3 days, since I knocked on your doors asking for shelter." The silence that followed was absolute. I saw how their brains processed the information, how the pieces began to fit. "I knocked on your door first, Jessica," I continued, my voice steady, though my heart was pounding. "I told you I had lost everything, that I needed a place to sleep, and you slammed the door in my face because you were afraid of what the neighbors at the club would say." Jessica paled. "I didn't know it was really you," she started to say. "You looked like a homeless person. I thought it was some kind of scam." "It was me," I said firmly. "Your mother. Dirty and desperate. And you didn't care." I turned to Michael. "And you handed me $50 as if I were an annoying beggar. You told me it affected your reputation, that I was a distraction." Michael opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His face had gone from arrogant to utterly horrified. But Daniel and Sarah, I pointed to the couple sitting on the sofa, their hands still intertwined, opened their door immediately. They gave me their bed, their food, their warmth, without asking questions, without worrying about appearances. They were even willing to sell their wedding rings to help me. Jessica finally found her voice. "This was a trap," she accused, her voice rising. "You set a trap for us." "I gave you a test," I corrected. "A test you failed spectacularly." Robert intervened, his voice cutting through the tension. "Allow me to clarify your mother's financial situation." He took out the documents and put them on the table. "Linda Miller is not bankrupt. She lost nothing. Her companies are operating with record profits. Her accounts are intact. Her net worth is currently approximately $58 million. The number floated in the air like a bomb. Jessica and Michael looked at the documents, unable to completely process what they were seeing. "This was all acted," continued Robert. "Your mother pretended to lose everything to see how you would react. To see who would love her without money, who would worry about her well-being over their personal image." Jessica let herself fall into a chair. Her face was white as paper. Michael remained standing stiff, as if in shock. Daniel got up from the sofa. His voice trembled, but it grew stronger as he spoke. "You two have treated me like a failure for years. As if choosing to be a teacher was a shame for the family. As if Sarah wasn't enough because she didn't have money or a name. You looked at me with pity, with contempt." Jessica tried to interrupt, but Daniel raised his hand. "No, it's my turn to speak. For years, I heard you make hurtful comments. I heard you laugh at my salary. I heard you compare your houses, your cars, your lives with mine, as if I had failed at something fundamental." Tears ran down Daniel's face, but his voice grew stronger, filled with righteous anger. "And when Mom appeared at my door, dirty and scared, I didn't even hesitate. Because that's how they raised me, to love without conditions, to help without asking. And you two had the same upbringing, the same parents, the same lessons, but you chose something different." Sarah stood up next to him. Her voice was calm, but sharp. "And you hated me. I know you did. Because I wasn't good enough for your brother. Because I cleaned offices and didn't have a college education. But when your mother needed help, when you rejected her, we welcomed her. And we would do it again." Jessica finally reacted. She began to cry. Not silent tears, but loud, dramatic sobs. "I'm sorry," she screamed. "I didn't know. I thought she was a stranger. If I had known it was really you, Mom." "That is precisely the point," I said with a hard voice. I had to be a stranger for you to treat me like that. But I am still your mother. And if I had truly been homeless, I still deserved more compassion than you showed me. Michael found his voice. This isn't fair. You put us in an impossible position. You tricked us. I put you in a position of choice, I corrected. A choice Daniel passed without even thinking. You failed. Not because you didn't know it was me. You failed because your values are rotten to the core. Robert cleared his throat. Linda had asked me to bring documents to modify her will, to completely disinherit Jessica and Michael and leave everything to Daniel and Sarah. Jessica stopped crying instantly. Her eyes went wide with horror. You can't do that, she said. I can, I replied. And I had every intention of doing so. Had? Asked Michael, catching the past tense. Daniel and Sarah convinced me not to make that decision today, I explained. They told me to give you a chance, that forgiveness is a path, not an event. Thank you, whispered Jessica, looking at Daniel, her voice raw with fear and desperation. Thank you. Don't thank me, said Daniel coldly. I would have let Mom disinherit you. It was Sarah who argued for mercy, the woman you despised. Jessica turned to Sarah. I'm sorry, she said. I'm sorry I treated you badly. I'm sorry for everything. Sarah looked at her for a long moment. You don't believe me yet, she said finally, her voice cutting through the layers of pretense. You are scared of losing your inheritance. But when that fear passes, when you are back in your mansion and your comfortable life, you will despise me again because you haven't changed. You're just scared. Sarah's words were like precision knives. Jessica opened her mouth to protest, but stopped because she knew it was true. I turned to my 3 children. This is what is going to happen, I said. I am not going to change my will today, but I am also not going to continue being your personal bank. Allowances are over. Financial bailouts are over. If you want my money, when I die, you will have to earn a real relationship with me first. What does that mean? Asked Michael. It means family therapy, replied Robert. It means real work on your relationships. It means demonstrating for years, not days or weeks, that you have genuinely changed. And if you don't do it, the will gets rewritten and everything goes to Daniel and Sarah. Jessica and Michael looked at each other. I could see the calculations forming in their minds. They were evaluating if the effort was worth it, if faking change for years was an investment that yielded enough return. And that broke my heart again, because even now, even after everything, they kept thinking in transactional terms. There is something else I need to say, I continued. And this is the most important thing. Daniel, Sarah, come closer, please. They stood up and walked toward me. I took their hands in mine. You two showed me something I had forgotten existed. You showed me genuine love, real sacrifice, values that are not bought or sold. And although I am not going to rewrite my will today, I am going to do something right now. I looked at Robert. The package we prepared, I said. Bring it. Robert smiled, a rare, genuine smile, and took a thick envelope out of his briefcase. He handed it to Daniel. Open it, I told him. With trembling hands, Daniel opened the envelope. Inside were legal documents and a checkbook. He read aloud, property deed. His eyes went wide. Mom, what is this? It is the deed to a house, I explained. A real house. With 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. A big garden for Sarah to plant all the flowers she wants, in a safe neighborhood near the school where you work. I bought it 2 days ago, when I knew what you were going to do for me. Daniel looked at the document, still not believing what he saw. We can't accept this, he said. It is too much. It is not a gift, I clarified. It is recognition. It is my way of saying I saw what you did, that I value your character more than I ever valued your siblings' university degrees. Sarah cried silently. Linda, she whispered. We didn't have to pass any test. We didn't expect anything in return. I know, I said, hugging her tight. That is why you deserve it. Because you didn't expect it. Because you would have done it anyway. Jessica stood up abruptly. This is unfair, she screamed. We are your children too. Why do they receive a house now and we get nothing? I turned to her with icy calm. Because you already have houses. Houses I helped pay for. You have received from me for decades. Money, opportunities, connections, everything you asked for. Daniel never asked for anything. He worked. He fought. He built a dignified life with his own hands. And when I needed him, he was there. Michael intervened. Then this is punishment. You are punishing us for a mistake. It wasn't a mistake, I said with a hard voice. It was a revelation. A mistake is something you do unintentionally. You consciously chose to close your doors on me. You chose your comfort over my well-being. Those were decisions, not mistakes. But we regret, insisted Jessica. We are sorry today. You are sorry, I replied, my voice steady. Because you discovered I still have money. Because you're afraid of losing your inheritance. But what about the regret when I was just a dirty woman at your door? Where was your compassion then? The silence that followed was so dense it hurt to breathe. Jessica was crying again. Michael looked at the floor. Daniel and Sarah clung to each other, overwhelmed by everything. Listen to me well, all three of you, I said, looking at everyone. This family is broken. I contributed to it. I taught you that money solves everything, that success is measured in possessions. Jessica, Michael, you learned that lesson too well. Daniel, you rejected it. And now we all have to live with the consequences. I turned specifically to Jessica and Michael. If you want a relationship with me, if you want me to consider keeping you in my will, here are the conditions. First, family therapy. All of us, every week, no exceptions. Second, I want to see you do community service. I want you to work with homeless people. See the faces of people like the one you thought I was. Third, I want real apologies, not to me, but to Daniel and Sarah, for years of contempt and condescension. And fourth, I continued, my voice firm, I want time. Real time. Not calls when you need something, but family dinners, genuine conversations, true interest in each other's lives. I want a real family, not a business transaction disguised as a relationship. That is asking a lot, said Michael. Weakly. It is the minimum, I corrected. It is literally the minimum you should want to do if you really care about me as a person and not as a walking inheritance. Jessica approached. Mom, she said with a broken voice. You are right about everything. I have become someone horrible, someone you never wanted me to be. And I don't know if I can change, but I want to try. Not for the money, but because I saw my future when you closed that door. I saw myself becoming an old and lonely woman in an empty mansion. And it terrified me. It was the first genuine thing I had heard her say in years. Maybe there was hope. Maybe. Time would tell. Michael also approached. I also want to try, he said. I don't know how to fix this, but I want to learn. I looked at both of them. The skepticism must have been evident on my face, because Jessica added, I know you don't believe us, and it's okay. We haven't earned your trust, but give us the chance to rebuild it, please. I looked at Daniel. He was the one who had suffered their disdain the most. What do you think? I asked him. Daniel took a deep breath. If they really try, if they really change, then yes, give them the chance. But if this is just an act, if they go back to their old patterns once the shock passes, then Mom must fulfill her threat. Sarah nodded in agreement. Everyone deserves a second chance, she said. But third chances have to be earned. It was settled. Those were the rules. Robert wrote it all down. He would make a formal document establishing the conditions for Jessica and Michael to remain in my will. If they failed any of the requirements during the next 3 years, they would be automatically removed. There is one more thing, I said, looking at Daniel and Sarah. I want you to know that whatever happens with your siblings, you will always have a place in my life. You saved me. Not from the street, because I was never really there, but from becoming someone so bitter and cynical that I would have lost faith in humanity. Sarah hugged me. You saved us, too, she whispered. You showed us that doing the right thing matters, that our values have meaning. We passed the next hour fixing details. Robert scheduled the first family therapy session. Jessica and Michael committed to the conditions. They signed documents. They made promises. I didn't know if they would keep them, but at least now there was a path, a possibility. And that was more than I had 3 days ago when I started this test. When finally everyone left, when the house went back to silence, I sat on the old sofa with Daniel and Sarah by my side. I am sorry I judged you, I told Sarah, taking her hand. I am sorry for all the years I made you feel less. I am sorry for every look of disappointment, every hurtful comment I didn't stop. You were exactly what Daniel needed. You were exactly what this family needed, and I was too blind to see it. Sarah squeezed my hand. Forgiveness is not begged for, Linda. It is offered, and I forgive you. Because I understand you were afraid for your son. You wanted the best for him. Only your definition of best was wrong. My definition of everything was wrong, I admitted. I built an empire, but almost lost the only thing that truly matters: family, genuine connection, love without conditions. Daniel put his arm around my shoulders. You didn't lose it, Mom. We are still here. And now you know who we really are. That is a gift. He was right. This horrible and necessary test had given me clarity. Painful, yes, but also clarity. I knew exactly where I stood with each of my children. I knew who loved me with or without money. I knew who would sacrifice something real for me. And I also knew something else. I knew the money I had spent my life accumulating was just a tool. Nothing more. It didn't buy love. It didn't buy loyalty. It didn't buy the things that truly mattered. What mattered was sitting next to me on an old sofa in a small house. It was a teacher with a modest salary and his hardworking wife. It was people who valued flowers in the garden more than diamonds in the ears. It was real family. Standing at the door of that modest house 3 days ago, dirty and rejected by 2 of my children, I thought I had hit rock bottom. But I was wrong. I had found something more valuable than all the money in my bank accounts. I had found the way back to what really matters. And although the path forward with Jessica and Michael was uncertain, at least now I knew the truth. And the truth, however painful it might be, was better than the comfortable illusion I had been living in. Money buys many things, I thought, looking around that small and humble living room. But it doesn't buy the doors that open when you need them most. It doesn't buy the hands that hold you when you fall. It doesn't buy the love that welcomes you without questions. Those things only come from the heart. And the only hearts big enough to give me that were here in this house, in this moment. And that was worth more than $58 million. So, after hearing my story, what do you think? If you were in my shoes, would you have given Jessica and Michael another chance? Or would you have stuck to your guns and completely disinherited them? Let me know in the comments below. I really want to hear your thoughts.